Good afternoon.
Okay, Phil, go right ahead.
Today is Wednesday, January 27th, 2021 at 1 p.m. My name is Philip McGovern. I am the recording secretary of the Thomas Warren Museum. Richard Pucciarelli is also on the line, and he is the president of the Thomas Warren Museum. And we are speaking with Barbara Jamison Holder, and we will be chatting with her for our oral history collection. Good afternoon, Barbara.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm okay. When and where were you born?
I was born in Elizabeth in 1958.
Okay.
And then in 1959, my parents bought a home on Pine Tree Road in Old Bridge when I was 1 year old.
Was that a new development at the time?
It was. There was a previous owner there, but they sold to my parents. I guess they had only been there a little while.
All right. So tell us about your mom and dad and any siblings you have.
I have a twin brother and sister and an older brother. My dad worked at American Cyanamid in Linden. His mom, Lillian, was Jeanette's sister, and they lived on Blanky Street, West Blanky Street in Linden. So
okay.
How my mom and dad met is kind of like the family, oh boy kind of thing. They met on vacation. My aunt and uncle and my mother and my father were all on vacation in Florida. The men were on a layoff from Cyanamid, and my mother and her sister were on vacation from college. And they sold their train tickets so that they could drive back to New Jersey with these two men that they had just met. And I'm not even, it's the story. And then 3 months later, my parents were married.
Wow.
And he was actually engaged to another woman at the time, and I actually have a picture of her that Lillian, my grandmother, gave to me. But that was the story. And then my aunt and uncle got married a month later, so my grandmother lost both of her daughters one summer.
Wow. Now, how about your brothers and sisters?
My one brother passed a couple of years ago from heart attack in the middle of the night.
Sorry.
My sister and her husband live in Pennsylvania. My other brother lives in Pennsylvania. But we grew up at 39 Pine Tree, just around the corner.
Why did your folks move? Do you know at all?
Pardon me?
Why did they move down to this area?
Well, my mother and father were living with Lillian in their dining room at West Blanky Street. They needed a house of their own. They had my older brother and me, and they were living with the grandparents. So they heard of a development that was fairly new and decided to take a drive one day and purchase the house.
And also close to your other relatives.
Yes, because at that point, Jeanette and Frank were already on the farm, and Jeanette's mother, Olga, and John had their home also off of 516. So everybody was close by.
Now, Frank and Jeanette, that was the Geik last name, correct?
Yes. He didn't like to be called Frank. He liked to be called Uncle Geik.
Gotcha.
My father was not in favor of that, but he didn't mind it. So.
Okay.
But
now, tell us about you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Tell us about your early schooling and your friends in the area.
I went to the JCC kindergarten on 516, and then I attended Southwood School through the 5th grade. And then I went through Jonas Salk Middle School all 3 years. My class was the only class that attended for 3 solid years because the school opened up in the middle of the year. So everybody else only got 2.5 years and so forth. And then I went on to East Brunswick Vocational School and studied fashion. And then I went to Montclair to get a degree in home economics education because my first grade teacher, Miss Laughlin, inspired me to want to be a teacher.
Wow. How did she do that?
She was a very kind and loving woman. She was also, in the summertime, she was a missionary. So I just found that inspiring. And my grandmother sewed, so I just found a love of sewing. And so I became a fashion teacher and a cooking teacher, and I just retired in June after 37 years.
Where did you work? What schools?
I worked in Piscataway. I worked at Piscataway Vocational, and then I ended my career at Freehold Regional in Manalapan.
Okay. Now, you said your mom had worked at Cedar Ridge. Now, Cedar Ridge was the school where the high school is now, correct?
Yes. There was Madison High School, and there was Cedar Ridge. That was
Sandburg now. Madison now is Sandburg, I believe.
Yes, I saw that from Google Earth search, yes. Mom worked at Cedar Ridge, and she worked in the main office. She was the vice principal's secretary.
Very nice.
And in the summertime, I used to go in there and help her make all the copies that had to go into the teachers' mailboxes for the first day of school.
Oh.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun working there in the summertime. It was a lot of fun.
Good. I'm glad. Now, tell us about the farm.
Well, the farm has been there as long as I can remember. I'm not sure when it was built. All I can tell you is the house was never finished as far as the patio was concerned because Jeanette's brother, Seymour, fell off the roof onto the concrete patio, so the patio was never finished. And that was 1949. Now, Jeanette and Frank basically lived out of the downstairs of the farmhouse.
Now, who were Frank and Jeanette?
Pardon?
Frank and Jeanette were who?
They were my great aunt and uncle.
Okay, and Olga and
John were
right.
Jeanette's parents.
Okay, so they were your great-grandparents.
They were my great-grandparents, yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So Frank and
Olga
Jeanette...
and John lived in a very small little cabin, which I suspect John built because he was a carpenter in Norway. So I suspect that he built this little house. They had chickens and cows and things like that. I remember chasing the chickens all around the yard when I was very little.
Now, they lived on the farm, correct, or was it their farm?
No, they lived in a different cabin. Jeanette and Frank's farm was separate.
Gotcha.
Olga and John's house was someplace between the police department and Cedar Ridge. There was a left-hand dirt road. The only thing that I really remember about it is that my dad hated driving down it because it was so long and narrow, and we had a big station wagon because there were 6 of us.
Oh.
And I remember him telling us how there was no garbage service, that they would just dig trenches in the backyard and bury things. And then I remember when I was in college, my mom said that Larry, my Uncle Larry, Jeanette's brother, sold the property to a developer. So there could be some kind of other structure there now where their home used to be.
Even.
I don't know. There was never a name on the road, so I honestly couldn't tell you what road it was. But so they lived basically downstairs in the farmhouse. They had many, many chest freezers because Jeanette did a lot of canning and freezing. They had a lot of fruit trees.
Oh, okay.
They
like apples
peaches,
and such? And
apples and peaches. So she would make applesauce and peach preserves, and she would freeze and can a lot of things. So they had shelves and chest freezers in the downstairs of the house, which is pretty basically where they lived. We only went to the upstairs on special occasions for a family dinner at Christmas or something.
All right.
And the funny part is you would think you were walking into a Sicilian home because everything was covered in plastic. I'm not even kidding you. Everything was covered in plastic. And Jeanette would decorate the whole upstairs of the house for Christmas, and she would always have a gingerbread house every year to show off. But they pretty basically came and went from the back door. And to me, the upstairs of the house just looked like a beautiful museum because it was so well kept because nobody was ever up there, you know. I remember walking from Southwood Development to the little white library, the Old Bridge Library. There was a little white building just past the A&P on 516. There was a little white building that was the library, and we used to go there and walk there to get books out. But
now, where was the A&P?
Right at 516, near Route 18. Okay, there's a little shopping center. There was an A&P, Southwood Pharmacy. There was a little like mom and pop diner type of establishment there. We used to go there to get a soda or an ice cream soda once in a while. And right around the corner from that shopping center, there was a little white building on the right, and that was the Old Bridge Library. And we used to walk there to check out books.
What kind of books did you take out?
I took out a lot of fantasy reading books and history books. I've always been a history book fan. I love history. I think it's fascinating.
Wow. I believe there are still some stores there now in the location you're talking about, just before 18.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are. I've been there a few times because I still do shop at the old Polish market across the railroad tracks. My mom used to send us down to the Polish market to get kibasi because on Sunday my grandmother and grandfather would come over. She was Irish, he was German, and he would bring his own rye bread and his newspapers on a Sunday, and she would send us to go get the kibasi for Grandpa.
Now, that was on Bordentown, I believe, or Main Street?
Yeah, Bordentown Avenue, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that section? Wow.
Yeah,
that was
still
a
there
bit
now.
of a walk. That was a walk?
We used to walk from Pine Tree Road all the way there to go get kibasi.
That's a nice, getting good exercise doing that walk.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We walked to A&P all the time. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was living in Southwood Development on Pine Tree was a pretty nice experience. No one ever locked their windows or doors. We came home from school for lunch, and we went back to school. The day President Kennedy was assassinated, they sent everybody home and closed the school, and we all went home.
1963, yeah.
You know, there were a lot of historical things that took place. You know, we had the air raid drills where we had to hide under our desks. And I've told some of my students over the years some of these historical things that I've remembered. And I said to them, ask your parents, get these stories from your grandparents. Because once they're gone, you can't replace that.
That is correct. That's why we record.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But I can tell you that Jeanette's sister, Lillian, actually went back to Norway when she was 5. But the king said she could only stay a year, and he sent her back to the United States because she would lose citizenship. Oh. And then after that, my grandma Lillian told me she would never go back to Norway unless they built a bridge. I guess it took a very, very long time.
That's funny. Now you said you went to school.
She was born in 1901, so if she was there in 1906. That must have been an awfully long boat ride.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Big time.
Big time. Yeah.
Now you're saying this is who now that was born in 1901?
That was Jeanette's sister Lillian.
Okay. How many other sisters or brothers did they have?
She only had one sister, but she had 4 brothers: Uncle Larry, Uncle Walter, Uncle Johnny, and Uncle Seymour.
Okay.
Seymour is the one that fell on the patio.
In 1949, right?
Right, 1949, right.
Wow.
Yeah. My Uncle Larry lived next to Jeanette and Frank's farm. There was a little green concrete building. I suspect it was an old garage or gas station. And it was painted like mint green. And Uncle Larry lived in there, I think, until my great-grandfather John passed, and then he moved in with Olga to take care of Olga until
he passed
her
in
passing.
1959, according to the obituary.
Right, right. So Larry sold off Olga's property and moved to Maine to be near my cousins that lived up there near Bangor. But I'll tell you, growing up in Old Bridge was a really, really nice experience. We used to just get on our banana bikes and a T&J sandwich in a brown paper bag, and just, you had to be home before the streetlights came on, and that was the rule.
Wow.
You know, it was a very easygoing neighborhood to live in.
It was called Madison, of course, at the time.
Yeah, it was called Madison Township back then, yes. Yes, and we lived on Pine Tree. Yeah.
Now, when did you move out?
I moved out to go to college in 1978.
Okay.
So I went away to Montclair State, and a lot of stuff that happened while I was away at college, I'm not really 100% sure about. All I know is that Larry sold Olga's property, and that was the end of that. And I'm sure whoever bought that property, if they did some digging, they found some really good glassware, because
that you're talking about now, where Olga
everything
lived.
went in trenches, you know?
That's where Olga lived, you're saying now.
Yes, Olga lived in that little house that John built way back off the road.
Now, what happened to the buildings on the farm? Do you have any idea?
Jeanette's house?
Yes.
I don't know what actually happened to Jeanette's house. All I knew was that my mother told me that they made the property into a park.
Gotcha.
And I drove over there one day after work to go look, and I saw the park, and I was like, wow. I still saw the house, and then a couple years later, I didn't see the house anymore. So I don't know what happened to the house.
Now, what years are we talking about that you had gone over there, approximately?
Probably about 1990.
So the house was still there, you're saying, in 1990?
I think so.
Okay. Now, let me shift gears now. You said you went
to... Huh?
Go ahead.
I've driven through Southwood a few times on my way to the Polish market just to see the old neighborhood. And I know that the people who bought my mom and dad's house, they took the carport and filled it in. I think it's now a dining room. But my father, being Lillian's son, coming from Norway, did not believe in fences. My father only believed in trees and bushes. So our house only had a fence in the backyard, and that's only because we had a pool. But everything we were on the side corner by Essex Lane, so there were trees and rose bushes all around the side of the house and the front of the house.
Were your folks gardeners at all?
Oh, yes. My mother loved her rose bushes. She couldn't always get them to thrive as well as she wanted, but she did love tending to them.
All right.
But we spent a lot of summers on the farm picking the fruits and vegetables, and then Jeanette and Frank would only take the very best fruits and vegetables to the market. If it had a bruise or a lump or a bump or something, they would give it to us to take home. She would never bring anything. Now, I don't know what market she brought her foods to, but she would only bring the very best.
Could have been Perth Amboy. They could have gone to New York. Who knows?
It's possible that they did go to New York. I'm not 100% sure. But, shucking corn, picking green beans, potatoes, strawberries, peaches, apples, that was part of our summers. And in the
you
backyard,
said it was a 40-acre farm, correct?
Huh?
You said it was a 40-acre farm.
Yeah. Right in the back of the house, out the back door, were all the fruit trees. Then there was a small wooden bridge that was pretty rickety that went to the other 40 acres, where you needed to have the plow and the tractor and so forth. And that's where she grew all the potatoes and strawberries and things like that. And that's how I learned to drive. I used to drive the tractor.
How old were you?
I was probably about 15. Yeah, probably about 15.
So
my brother showed me how to use the gears and the clutch, and
so you can drive a stick shift.
Yes, I can.
I'm impressed. Now, before I go back to the farm, you said you went to kindergarten in the Jewish school?
Yes.
Now, was that B'nai B'rith Temple or no?
I'm not sure. The report card says JCC, kindergarten. So I'm not sure. Like I said, I was very young. I know that there was construction. We were in the basement, and I remember it being very loud and noisy, and you could hardly hear the teacher for all the construction that was going on. I guess they were building it at that point in time. Yeah.
How many students were in the class with you, do you know?
Oh, I really honestly don't remember.
Okay.
Well,
you were young.
I couldn't honestly.
Now, you said you worked the farm.
Yeah, we all did. Every summer we were there picking
your brother
weeding.
and
My brothers and my sister, my mother, my father, my Aunt Emma, Uncle John, Lillian's brother John. We would all be down there working on the farm to help Jeanette and Frank, because Jeanette and Frank did not have children.
Uh-huh.
They never had children, so they didn't really have anybody to help them except for us.
Now, you got paid in vegetables and fruits, or?
We did not get paid, no. It was just a family, you did it for family. That's the way it was.
Right. But what kind of work did you do on the farm?
Mostly I just picked and weeded. Sometimes we would get out the hose, and weed with the hose and things like that. A lot of times she would have us snipping the green beans inside so that she could can them or freeze them, cutting up the peaches so that she could freeze them.
She had a large variety of crops, fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, she did have a wide variety of things there, but it was also hard work, but it was also fun because one strawberry for me, one for the basket, so they didn't mind if we ate along the way. That was perfectly fine with them. They had no problem with that.
Were your friends impressed that you worked the farm all summer?
I don't really think so. I think they were just busy doing their own thing.
Uh-huh.
It was the 60s, and they were older than me. Most of the kids in the neighborhood were older than me. So
I see. But you had friends in the neighborhood, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. Across the street, I had Denise. Next door, I had Diane. And like I said, we would get on our bikes. We would ride all over the place on our bicycles. Down behind Southwood School, we used to go do laps around the school. And in the wintertime, I can tell you this, in the wintertime, we would take buckets of water from our house and bring it down to the school and pour the water onto the dirt so that it would freeze so that we could go ice skating.
Now, where was this?
Oh, geez, this had to be back in 65, 67.
No, but where? 60. Where exactly?
At Southwood School.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. They had a little flat dirt area that I think they probably used as a field for some reason. And we used to go down there with buckets of water in the wintertime and dump it there so that it would freeze over, and by the next day we could go ice skating.
That's really good. You had your own skates?
Yeah. And our own sled. And we lived next to Essex Lane, which was a hill. So it was a very high incline. So we would actually, one time I was on my sled and I went right down the hill into the lady across the street, right into her fence. That hurt a lot.
Did you break any bones?
Pardon?
Did you break any bones?
No, I just got a big scar on my knee because she had a chain link fence because she had a dog. And the brakes on the sled were not working, and I just, boom, right into Agnes's fence, and it was not pretty.
Now, where did you shop and that sort of thing? And what were the roads like back in the 60s?
Well, back then, we only had one car. Nobody had more than one car. Usually the wives didn't work. My mom would walk to 516, and she would get a ride from one of the other people that worked at the high school. In the early days, my mom was a nurse, and she worked in a nursing home, and then she got a job at school. so she could be off on the school holidays like us.
That's great.
But people didn't have more than one car, so the narrow streets in the Southwood development weren't really an issue. Later, in the 80s, it became a big issue for my mom and dad because so many new people moved in. They all had 2-3 cars, and the roads started to get very crowded, and it was very dangerous.
So 516 was a very busy road.
It became a very busy road. Yes, it did. Yeah.
Now, there was 18 there in your youth? Route 18?
Yes, Route 18 was just down the street from the A&P. I had a girlfriend who lived across Route 18. I used to walk down and cross the highway by myself to go visit her at her house. We used to go to St. Thomas Church and cross the highway to do that and all that kind of stuff. It was, like I said, it was safe to do that kind of thing back then. Not so much now, I'm sure.
Right. But now people were telling me back then they remember when Route 9 was a 2-lane road.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
It was.
It was.
That must have been a little dicey.
Yeah. A little dangerous because if I remember correctly, I don't think it had shoulders. I don't think there were any shoulders on that road at that time. And then, of course, then they widened it and so forth and so on. And then they widened Route 18, too. But we used to walk up to W.T. Grant's up at the top of the hill to go buy yarn and craft things and stuff like that.
Where was Grant? Where were they?
W.T. Grant's was, if you leave 516 and you go up 18 up the hill, I think, what is it, the Old Bridge Diner or the Route 18 Diner or something is on the left. W.T. Grant's was on the right. And there was a shoe store in there and a W.T. Grant's and a Newberry's. Yeah, and we used to go ride our bikes up there to go buy yarn and things because I've been crocheting since I was that young.
What'd you make?
We did a lot of blankets and slippers and things like that.
Was it just you or your mom did? Or?
My mom did, yeah. My mom did a lot of blankets and ponchos because, then in the 70s, everybody was wearing ponchos.
Okay.
But pretty much everybody in my family crocheted or knitted. Lillian did, and my other grandmother did. But they would go so fast that I couldn't pick up what they were doing. So I pretty much taught myself, actually.
I'm not bad. That's great. That's good. Now, what about, did you go, was there a movie theater around that you went to, or that sort of thing?
Yes, we used to go to the Route 18 Drive-In Theater, the Turnpike Drive-In Theater, way up on Route 18. There was a drive-in, and every once in a while they would have a special. I hate to admit this out loud because, I used to tell my students, the decisions that you make and the choices that you make, but I once got 18 kids in the back of my 64 Chrysler to go to the all-night drive-in because it was like $5 a carload.
Wow.
So we put everybody in the trunk and the back seat. Yeah. You think about the things you did when you were that young,
No. Did they pay you, or you made a profit on that, right?
Don't I wish.
That's great.
But, yeah, it was a really nice neighborhood to grow up in. It really was. And we had a little tiny above-ground pool in the backyard. Not big. It was only about 3 feet high. But little swing set, little sandbox on the side yard. I actually had my wedding reception in my mother and father's side yard.
Now, when did you get married?
I got married in 1981. And we were, we didn't really have a lot of money to spend on the wedding. I had just graduated from college, so I was already in debt. So we got married at the Lutheran Church on 516, And then we had the reception in my mom and dad's side yard because we were on the corner. They had a very large side yard. And they had beautiful mimosa trees. My dad loved mimosa trees. And most of the pictures I have are underneath the mimosa trees on the side yard.
So that was a great place to grow up in, you're saying?
Oh, it was. It was really a wondrous place to grow up in. It really, really was. You know, mind you, it was the 60s and 70s, and there were kids who had their issues because it was that time in this history of the world. But, you know, it is what it is, and you have to live with the choices that you make, you know?
Yes. Now, when you got married, where did you move to?
I moved to Woodbridge because my husband worked at General Motors in Linden. So we moved to an apartment right across the highway from Rahway State Prison off of Route 1.
Did you want to put him in there sometimes?
No, but the girlfriend upstairs and I did lock ourselves in our apartment one day when there was a breakout from the prison. That was pretty scary.
When was that? In the early 80s, I assume.
84, maybe?
Wow.
I think they caught them down on Elizabeth Avenue someplace.
That's scary.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Lillian and her husband, John, lived on West Blanky Street near Wood Avenue. And he actually helped build the church there. I'm not sure the name of the church, but that's where all of that part of the family, they were all buried, you know, and put out to lay in church there. But my grandfather John was an orphan, and I've never been able to get records on him. I only have Lillian. I don't have John.
You mean going back to Norway or?
Yeah, I don't have anything going back on him because apparently his parents were killed in a train horse buggy accident in Pennsylvania, and he became an orphan, and the records were destroyed in a fire, so there's no orphanage records left on him. And
he was in an orphanage, you're saying? Wow.
Yes, he was. And then,
any idea how old he was?
Oh, he was very young. He was only a child, maybe 5 or 6 when this happened. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
And then he was in the service, and I suspect from the research that I have so far, I suspect that he lied about how old he was so he could get in the war, because he was in World War I in the infantry.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's quite a bit of family history.
Sounds it. Maybe if there was a way to get a hold of a census, and you may find out some information about. I did find out some information. See, the whole thing about Lillian and John was he was 40 and she was 21 when they got married. Oh boy.
Which was very unusual at that time. So he died, I think I was 4, maybe 3 or 4 when he died. He was so much older than her. So I don't really remember a whole lot about him. And he never really spoke about his history. He wasn't the kind of person that, he was a very private person.
Now, we're talking about Lillian and John. Just refresh my memory. Who are they?
Yeah, Lillian's husband, John, yeah. They lived on West Blanky Street, yeah.
And Lillian was?
Jeanette's sister.
Uh-huh, okay.
Yeah.
So your great-aunt's sister?
Yes.
All right.
Lillian was my grandmother because she had my father.
Right. Okay. Now, I hate to get into too personal, but your husband was still living, or?
Yes, my husband is still living. He's retired from GM now.
All right.
And we live in Mercer County.
Okay.
And I just retired, so my daughter's getting married in April, hopefully.
Very nice.
We won't have to. We've already postponed it twice.
Oh, because of the COVID, of course.
Yeah. So hopefully this is going to happen in April, and that's it, really.
Do you miss going back to the farm?
I do miss it, and as I said, every time my husband gets in the mood for kielbasa and I drive down to the Polish market, I take a drive through Southwood, I take a drive down 516, I go to the park, and I can see the farmhouse and Uncle Larry's house and Olga's house and all the animals and the chickens, and Olga had so many cats on her farm. So really? I can all see it, and I can relive it in my mind. I just wish I had more pictures to share with you, but I honestly don't.
Well, we have the pictures that you did send us of Olga and John and Lawrence and those folks.
Yeah.
Now, you moved out to Woodbridge. Now, did you ever come back to Old Bridge at all, or that was a permanent
No,
move?
We went right from Woodbridge to East Windsor. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Never moved back to Old Bridge. Honestly, I always wanted to buy my parents' house, but we weren't ready to do that when they were selling, so I didn't have much of a choice on it. So.
Now, when did they sell?
They sold when my daughter was only like a year and a half, so 92, 93.
Okay. And just getting back to one point, I'm sorry.
My dad actually installed a wood-burning stove in the living room area inside the house. He bought that stove from the store, and it was from Norway. Apparently, Norwegians make the best wood-burning stoves. And if you Google 39 Pine Tree Road, and you can see the images on Realtor.com, that wood-burning stove is still inside that house, because I looked at it a couple of days ago. But they did close in the carport to make a dining room, because those houses had no dining rooms.
I just wondered about one thing about Olga, where she lived. There's a thing called historic aerials. I think that goes back to like 1939, those historical areas, and you go over a certain area and you just look down, kind of. Maybe Olga's house could be seen.
It's possible. Like I said, it didn't have a name on this dirt road, and the driveway was pretty much hidden by two very large trees. And my father used to have to slow down to a crawl so that he wouldn't miss it. It was really scary going down that driveway because it was so long. And, of course, the house was run on coal, and it wasn't square, and it wasn't level, and all the men in the Norwegian families are 6'4" and above, so you had a duck when you went through a doorway, otherwise you bumped your head on it, on the ceiling. But it's good memories. It was good times.
Was Partridge Road there when you were growing up? On
yes,
516?
it was. Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So then her place would have to be not down that way. I see. I just wondered if it was before or after Partridge. Maybe even real estate records might help at the town.
It might. I don't know.
But. All right, Rich, you want to have anything to chime in with? Rich?
No, not right now. I think, Phil, that, we can always look at historic aerials and see if we can find anything on there for houses. That would probably be a good place to look.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, that's about it. I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good. Well, thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward so much, and we look forward to meeting you in person and reviewing what you have. We'll, keep in touch. You can follow us on Facebook. On our Facebook page, Thomas Warren Museum on Facebook. If you have access to Facebook, we put announcements there as well. And so when we're going to reopen, I'm sure we're going to put an announcement up on Facebook as well. Okay, so that would be one way of following up with us in the future. And
further, please feel free to email me at any time.
All right, very good. All right,
Okay.
well, thank you very much. Have a very great afternoon. I'm going to end the recording now.
Well, hang on one second. This interview is going to be permanent, so.
Okay.
Barbara, thank you.
You are very welcome. Bye-bye now.
All right, bye.
All right, Phil, you're done, right? Okay.